from the first reading, it's obvious that Moses got the memo directed to all of us, the children of God, that we should bear the family resemblance when he says, "Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." He not only makes that statement, he goes on to talk about what holiness looks like. It's all about relationships with one another. It's all about our human interactions. And in those human interactions, holiness means we should not be angry with one another. We should not bear grudges against one another. We should try to cherish one another. But you and I both know that in a world full of human beings, that it's not always peaches and cream. There are frictions. There are rivalries. There are at times grudges. And dare I say, there is at times a feeling and a desire for revenge. Revenge. It just flows off your tongue so easily. Have you ever heard the expression, revenge is a dish best served cold? Ever heard it? I thought it was something Shakespeare quoted. It actually, when I looked it up, was something from a book written in the mid-18th century called Dangerous Liaisons, from the French, translated to English. What it means is that if you are seeking revenge, you do it without any heart. You do it without any emotion. And if you're good at revenge, you do it when your offender least expects it. From my favorite movie, The Wicked Witch of the West, "I'll get you, my pretty." And she waited until she could get Dorothy. Revenge, Jesus talks about in the gospel when he quotes the law in the book of Leviticus. And he says, "An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." Some people try to use that as their God-given right to believe and support the death penalty. They don't listen to the rest of Jesus in the gospel. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is actually a just and merciful law, because people in revenge would take extremes and do something not concomitant and equivalent. Case in point, if someone steals your pen from your dorm room, you do not have a right to firebomb their car. Okay? It's just extreme justice. It's extreme revenge. Do you understand? I have a great story that happened to me actually in my first assignment in New York City. Big place. We had 9 priests, 1 brother, a whole city block in New York. And one of our friars said to me, "Can I borrow that nice long-sleeve red plaid shirt you have? It's a button-down shirt to go out to dinner." I said, "Sure, Marty, you can borrow it." I said, "But the label says dry clean only, so please don't put it in the wash." "Nope, I won't do that." Well, a week and a half later, I'm climbing the 3rd floor stairs to get to my room, and I see this tiny little shirt hanging on a hanger, all wrinkled, looks like it came from the boys section at Kmart. And I'm like, "Marty," I went right across the hall, "didn't I ask you not to throw it in the wash?" He said, "I forget. You could probably get another one without any trouble." Count to 10, take a breath. That evening, I went over to the choir rehearsal, as I always did. And one of our wonderful choir members, her name is Anne, and she hailed from Brooklyn. And she considered herself, nationality, Sicilian. She didn't say Italian. She said, "I'm Sicilian." So when I related the story to her, she looked me right in the eye, and you know what she said? She said, "Spit in his food." I laughed out loud. She pushed me. She said, "I said spit in his food. I'm serious." I said, "Girl, I can't do that." She says, "You know, that's at your house. You know, the cook prepares your food on a plate. Just have to go in. It's easy, and serve his food." I said, "That might be the Sicilian way, but that's certainly not the gospel way." I was told that I have to turn the other cheek. But you know, revenge can get the best of us sometimes. Jesus goes on to quote the law. It is right to love your neighbor, but it is also right to pray for your enemy and to take care of your enemy and to look favorably upon your enemy and try to treat them with kindness. We all know that G.K. Chesterton is right because he says your friends and your enemies are very often the same people. I know. I live in a house of enemies. They are my friends and confreres, but at times they get on my nerves and they're like my enemies. You live the same existence as I do. In family or in dormitory life or apartment life, you know that you are challenged sometime and that you have to put your best foot forward. And remember the words of the gospel, that we have no right to revenge, even though it's a natural reaction. But we do have every right to bear the family resemblance and to strive for holiness and to follow in the footsteps of Christ. Anyone ever see the movie entitled Love Actually? 2003, kind of an old movie, I know, passé. But the opening scene is so powerful. First thing you see is a man and a woman running into each other's arms and embracing. And the next, it's followed up by two young girls running to embrace their mother. And then two elderly females, obviously sisters who hadn't seen each other in a long time, in a very wonderful familial moment of embrace. And then you realize that this is an airport. This is the arrivals section of an airport. And of course everybody's going to be loving and kind, because who would send an enemy to pick you up at the airport? No one. But I love the words because there's a voiceover as all this is happening. And it's Hugh Grant. And he says, whenever I feel down about the condition of the world, I go to the arrivals gate at Heathrow Airport in London. Despite the fact that there's so much hatred and anger and greed in the world, Heathrow is one place where things seem different. At Heathrow, love is everywhere. Yes, it may be a contrived setting. Love is going to happen there. But isn't that the command we get from Jesus, that we are to love our neighbor and respect and pray for our enemies? And love should be the watchword for the way we live our lives. Dr. Martin Luther King summed it up very well from this passage in our gospel today. He wrote this in a jail in Georgia. And after noting that hate is just as injurious to the hater as to the hated, he writes this: of course, this is not practical. Life is a matter of getting even, of hitting back, of dog eat dog. My friends, we have followed the so-called practical way far too long a time now, and it has led inexorably to deeper confusion and much more chaos. Time is cluttered with the wreckage of communities which surrender to hatred and violence. For the salvation of our nation and the salvation of humankind, we must follow another way. We know the way. It is the way of Christ. It is the way of the gospel, where we don't seek revenge, where love is the way